LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 16th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. It's an early show this week for reasons I'll explain at the end of the show, when I also talk about how I'm moving my show to Monday next month. But this week is just a regular Sunday show, even though it's a little early. I'll be using the 12 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all this afternoon, I guess. There's a link down in the video description to my clip list. That's the notes that I use that tell me the topic and the network and who's speaking in each of the clips and what I wanted to say about the clip, so you could follow along if that really interests you. The topics I'll be covering this week are my title topic, COVID over in the U.S., which is a little bit of hyperbole, but the CDC did give out that directive this week that if you're vaccinated, you can pretty much take your mask off wherever you are, and that caused some confusion, and they made fun of that on last night's Saturday Night Live. Kate McKinnon as Anthony Fauci, even though it was the CDC and Rochelle Walensky, who I have a couple clips from coming up, who announced the new CDC directive. So I'll be covering that topic with news summaries, Rochelle Walensky clips, and the political comedy from Saturday Night Live last night. Then I'll also be covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict somewhat. It was in all the news summaries pretty much. And I will have a clip of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking to John Dickerson on CBS News' Face the Nation. And then finally, I'll have some follow-up clips from last week's topic, Republican mythology versus ideology, and the whole purge of Liz Cheney, because Liz Cheney was on a couple programs, and I'll compare the interview that Karl did of Liz Cheney on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos versus Chris Wallace's interview on Fox News Sunday. But like I said, I want to start with the political comedy this week. Saturday Night Live had Kate McKinnon playing Anthony Fauci. There's one good joke at the beginning here that I like, and I don't know, Kate McKinnon, as Anthony Fauci said on the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart on MSNBC this morning, when he reacted to this impression, he was all humble about it, but said that Kate McKinnon was a wonderful actress. And I mean, Kate McKinnon is awesome. I'm just going to show you the very beginning of that clip and then talk about it a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
It's your boy, Fauci, the patron saint of Purell. As you probably heard, we got some very good news this week, and I'm not just talking about J-Lo and Ben Affleck. The CDC announced that people who are vaccinated no longer need to wear masks, outdoors or indoors. Pretty great, right? But a lot of people had questions, such as, what does that mean? What the hell are you talking about? Is this a trap? So, to clear things up, I found a few doctors at the CDC who minored in theater, and I asked them to reenact various scenarios in order to demonstrate correct mask behavior. And remember, they only had 24 hours to put this little show together, so please welcome the CDC players and their first scene, man walks into a bar.
And, I don't know, there were some kind of funny moments in that cold open from Saturday Night Live last night. There's a link down in the video description where you can watch the entire the entire cold open on the Saturday Night Live YouTube channel for free. That's just the beginning of it. I don't know, in some ways, like a lot of Saturday Night Live skits, I think the premise is better than the sketch itself. The medical or the doctor improvisational player skits I didn't think were all that funny. I like the patron saint of Purell thing, and like I said, I thought Kate McKinnon, I mean, she doesn't sound exactly like Anthony Fauci, but I don't know, somehow she gets the spirit of Anthony Fauci. I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section, and I saw that because I'm doing the show so early, I seem to have some extra European viewers, because it's not like in the middle of the night in Europe like when I usually do the show. So welcome to Europe out there, to my European viewers who are may be watching live, have a rare opportunity to watch the live show. And what I've been doing recently, if you've noticed, is I've been showing the news summaries from longest to shortest. And by like 3 seconds this week, Fox News Sunday beat NBC News' Meet the Press. So I'm going to start with their news summary. It's very heavily focused on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the thing that, and several of the news summaries are focused on that. I think Fox News is definitely the most pro-Israel of all the pro-Israel corporate media, and all the corporate media kind of has a pro-Israel tilt, although Israel destroying that building where there were several journalistic outlets, well, I don't know. I'll discuss that. That was covered in all these news summaries, and I don't know, was that smart or was it crazy? Because, you know, you think you're going to get all this journalistic coverage if you destroy the building where the journalists are, but the journalists can't like help themselves from focusing on that part of the story to an inordinate degree. The journalists part of the story, and it comes up in all the news summaries that talk about Israel. Here you'll see they especially emphasize that the journalists got out safely and Israel warned them before the bombing. And anyway, I think I've overly introduced the clip as usual. I'll talk about it some more after. And this is on like I said, most of the news summaries do focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as breaking news. And they say breaking news in the Fox News Sunday intro from Chris Wallace. Although they don't really cover as good of the breaking news as you'll see from Richard Engel in the NBC News Meet the Press summary that comes next. But over-introduce the clip as usual, like I said. Talk some more after we watch it here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We begin with breaking news. Another night of fighting between the Israelis and Palestinians in the worst outbreak of violence in years. Israeli airstrikes hitting Gaza and targeting this high-rise, housing offices of the Associated Press and other media outlets. Journalists getting out safely after being warned a strike was imminent. The fighting also taking place inside Israel between Arabs and Jews, and on the border with Lebanon and Jordan. The U.S. spearheading diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the violence. President Biden speaking Saturday with both Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian leader Abbas. Let's get the latest now from Trey Yingst reporting from the Israel-Gaza border.
Overnight, rockets soar through the sky before being intercepted by Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome. Their target, the country's second largest city, Tel Aviv. Israel responded to the rocket fire with more airstrikes, hitting both military and civilian positions. The Israel Defense Forces also responded today to criticism for destroying a media building on Saturday in Gaza City. A spokesperson for the military said these buildings will not be a bulwark for Hamas, but provided no evidence the group was operating out of the location. The Israeli military is shelling the Gaza Strip amid incoming rocket fire, the damage done by this artillery seen throughout Gaza. Early this morning, a young child in Gaza City was pulled alive from the rubble of a collapsed building. Video from the scene shows how Gazans have lived the past week, trying to stay alive with very few places to hide. The Palestinian death toll in Gaza soared to more than 180 people. So far, 10 Israelis are dead, including one soldier, and dozens more injured. While Israel has killed many military leaders, at least 80 civilian women and children have died as well. The damage to Gaza's infrastructure will take years to recover from, and with no end to the fighting in sight, destruction will only increase. Preparations are underway for a possible ground invasion into Gaza. You can hear the sirens behind me as incoming rocket rounds are being intercepted by Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome. The Israeli military is still blocking access for international journalists to enter the Strip, meaning we don't know the true extent of the damage inside. Chris?
Trey, can we see, if you have your cameraman pan up, can we see some of the explosions above you?
Pan up, could you? Absolutely. You can see a few of the rounds from Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome. That white smoke is coming, and you can hear another interception right there, Chris. That's coming from the missile defense system that, according to the military this week, tells Fox News is 90% accurate. Though when these rockets do slip by, they cause severe damage in the border communities. And as we saw last night, the fire towards Israel's second largest city of Tel Aviv, a major escalation by the factions inside Gaza, and an indication that the Israeli security forces will continue their operations. Chris.
Trey Yingst on the Israeli border with Gaza. Trey, thanks and stay safe. And we'll have more on this with the panel. Now to a major shift in the way this country is dealing with the coronavirus. The Centers for Disease Control announced Thursday fully vaccinated people no longer need to wear masks in most circumstances. But there are a lot of questions about what that means for our daily lives. Joining us now, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
And like I said, I will have two Rochelle Walensky clips coming up when I cover the Is COVID Over in the U.S. topic. But one other piece of Fox News bias that I forgot to point out in that coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is you notice the Trey Yingst, the reporter, started his report with Palestinian rockets going to Israel, which, of course, where you start the story can often really affect how people see who the aggressor is and who the victim is. And if you start with Palestinian rockets going towards Israel, that gives you one framing of the narrative. And I thought that was kind of stupid when Chris Wallace had him show us the sky. I didn't think that was a really informative shot, tilting the camera up to the sky. Oh, look, chemtrails for the chemtrail conspiracists. That's why there's an Arab-Israeli conflict, because of those chemtrails up there that Fox News has exposed by tilting the camera up. No. Anyway, no, that's just a joke. But the next news summary, it doesn't show as much of the graphic footage that you saw from the Fox News Sunday news summary. But I think in terms of breaking news, which Fox News claimed to be showing you, it gives you more of a macro view of what's going on with resolving the conflict, and also in terms of what people's interests are and how actually both sides seem to have some interest in resolving the conflict now, even though the conflict also seems to have its own momentum. That's what the narrative you're going to get from Richard Engel, which is more looking at the interests of both sides rather than, I think, the more biased perspective you got from the Fox News Sunday narrative. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this slightly shorter, 3 or 4 second shorter news summary from NBC News' Meet the Press this morning that I'll talk about with you. It's Chuck Todd talking to Richard Engel, their reporter in the Middle East, over here.
On a good Sunday morning, we're going to get to all the news about the CDC mask recommendations, including the confusion that's resulted from the surprise announcement. But we're going to begin with the fighting between Israel and Hamas, one day after the Israelis targeted and demolished a building in Gaza, housing international news organizations. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, is in Tel Aviv for us. And Richard, on Friday, you and I talked about this, and you had said Hamas and the Israeli government were looking for an exit ramp. Why can't they find it?
Well, I think still that both sides do seem to want to find a way that they can declare victory. They both have a lot of interest in doing that. Israel so far hasn't invaded the Gaza Strip, and it could have done that. So it is holding off, and instead it is just launching airstrikes, causing a lot of damage inside Gaza. It is degrading the Hamas military infrastructure and destroying a lot of other buildings. If Israel were to roll in with its tanks, it would face intense ground assaults. Its soldiers could get kidnapped. There are booby traps. So there are a lot of reasons that Israel doesn't necessarily want to do that. Hamas doesn't want to see the region totally destroyed, doesn't want to see Gaza totally obliterated. And right now, it is, however, gaining a bit of support. And that's the problem here. These conflicts, once they start, tend to gain momentum. Palestinians in Gaza, for the last several years, have felt hopeless. They are imprisoned in the territory. The infrastructure is terrible. There's really no employment. We spoke to a woman in Gaza, and she said, why bother? Why bother dreaming about the future? Why bother opening a business when just every couple of years, everything is going to be destroyed and the clocks will start up again? And that hopelessness is dangerous. But I do think, yes, both sides are looking for a way where they could say they achieved something, and now let's dial it back without having to destroy the region and put a lot of Israeli troops at risk.
All right, but I am curious, how much influence does President Biden have over Bibi Netanyahu, who has certainly played his share of politics in this country, and how much influence do the Egyptians have over Hamas?
They're not. Neither side is particularly close to the other, but they do have influence. That is the way that these conflicts have ended in the past, with the United States and Egypt and other countries getting involved. So they don't have the kind of personal relationships. The U.S. is not even talking to Hamas. The U.S. reached out and spoke to Mahmoud Abbas, who has almost no influence over Hamas and what's happening in Gaza. But the United States still absolutely is a major power in this, has great relations with Israel, and its voice is important.
Richard Engel in Tel Aviv for us. Richard, please stay safe. Turning now to the news on COVID. The CDC had a lot of good reasons to decide that fully vaccinated people can go maskless in most situations. There are more than 121 million people have been vaccinated amid a growing number of studies showing that vaccines keep people from contracting or spreading the disease. In so many ways, it was the announcement we've been waiting for, a release from this ever-present reminder that COVID has changed and uprooted our lives. Yet at the same time, is it way too early to declare victory? A majority of Americans 18 or older are not fully vaccinated, and 25% say they won't get vaccinated at all. Plus, there is still an average of 34,000 new cases diagnosed each day. Beyond that, there are many questions. Why now? How does the new advice impact schools? What will businesses and local and state governments do about their own COVID regulations? Did the CDC feel pressured by politicians and growing public frustration to simply just drop the mask recommendations? And finally, how will we know who's really been vaccinated?
I do think that without more guidance, these guidelines will cause more confusion.
And joining me now is the director of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Rochelle Walensky. Dr. Walensky, welcome back to Meet the Press.
So, yeah, like I said, I will have two clips of Rochelle Walensky, actually not from NBC News Meet the Press, but one from CNN State of the Union, one from Fox News Sunday. But compare those two news summaries I just showed you, both almost exactly 4 minutes long. They both mostly focused on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and then at the end had a little blurb about what's going on with the new CDC directive on vaccinated people not having to wear masks. And like I said, I think that the Fox News Sunday news summary was more biased towards Israel, while Richard Engel gave you more of, activists like me who lobby local and state government. We do something called power mapping, where we like, who are the people who have the power to affect what's going to happen on this issue that is important to us. And Richard Engel kind of gave us the power mapping there with Hamas and Israel and what their interests are, and then Egypt and the United States as the biggest influence. Egypt is a big influencer with Hamas for peace. I mean, Iran is also a big influencer with Hamas, and then the Biden administration with influence with Israel, although, as Richard Engel said, Biden's not really close to Netanyahu, and Egypt's not really that close with Hamas, but that's the negotiating partners that we have right now. And I think Richard Engel did a great job of power mapping, like I said, the interests and what's stopping resolution and what is pushing for resolution, and hopefully this conflict that is hurting so many innocent people on both sides, and especially the Palestinian side, will be resolved soon, but who knows? And that I guess is what I learned more from the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. But also at the end, they both had little blurbs about the change in what's going on with COVID. And I think the one, Chuck Todd and the NBC News Meet the Press news summary there was much more informative. There was just like a brief news summary from Chris Wallace that didn't have all the information that you saw from Meet the Press. So Meet the Press got a lot more in there, I think, in a slightly shorter period of time. So NBC beats Fox News in those two news summaries. Now, this next news summary is the CBS News Face the Nation one. It's significantly shorter. All the rest of them are, well, this is under 3 minutes. And this one, I think, suffers from that bias I was talking about, where journalists really focus on things that happen in violent spaces that affect journalists, like the bombing of this building that had the AP and Al Jazeera, and I think there was some other journalistic outlet there. But I've talked enough after the last clip. I'll talk some more after we watch the CBS News Face the Nation news summary. This is John Dickerson, and then their reporter Imtiaz Tyab. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but you'll hear John Dickerson pronounce it in just a minute over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Margaret is on maternity leave. We begin today with the dramatic escalation of violence in the Middle East. Over the last week, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, at least 181 Palestinians, including 52 children, were killed in Gaza, with more than 1,200 wounded. According to the Israeli Defense Forces, 8 Israelis have been killed, including 2 children. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is in Tel Aviv and just filed this report.
Israel's bombardment of Gaza is only intensifying. 3 buildings were flattened this morning in a series of airstrikes, killing 23 people. It's the deadliest attack since violence broke out with Hamas nearly a week ago. But the horrors of Gaza took a twist yesterday when Israeli fighter jets destroyed a tower that was home to international media outlets, including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. Journalists were warned to leave ahead of the strike that's being called an assault on press freedom. Israel says the building was being used by Hamas intelligence, but offered no evidence. Associated Press President Gary Pruitt says they won't be silenced.
That building provided the best vantage point for the world to see the events in Gaza. And now that building is destroyed.
Israel's strike on the tower came just 20 minutes after Hamas showered rockets over Tel Aviv in an unprecedented attack. One landed in this busy intersection, badly damaging the street and killing 1 person.
Never has a Hamas rocket struck the heart of Tel Aviv quite like this, and never have we seen damage like this either.
Diplomatic attempts to contain the conflict in Gaza are underway. But in East Jerusalem, where this all began, Israeli soldiers continue to confront protesters angry at the looming evictions of 6 Palestinian families by Jewish settlers. Muna Jurd, who could lose her home, says it's time for this catastrophe to stop. It's hard to imagine there are potentially more serious problems unfolding amidst all this unrest, but across Israel, in mixed Arab and Jewish cities, there's been several nights of horrific neighbor versus neighbor sectarian violence not seen for decades. It's yet another complex issue for a country that's also politically paralyzed. After 4 elections in just 2 years, Israel's political parties remain unable to form a lasting government. And the fear now is without any unifying leadership, things could spiral out of control.
And while we wait for Prime Minister Netanyahu to get connected, we want to bring in the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Congressman.
I don't have a clip of Adam Schiff, but as usual, all of CBS News Face the Nation is split into segments and uploaded for free to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel. There's a link down in the video description to that CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel. You can see what Adam Schiff has to say, and then you can also see the entire 12-minute Benjamin Netanyahu interview that I'm taking a clip from a little later, that's about a little under 5 minutes long, that also talks a lot about that AP building. Like I said, the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, I think, was a little overly biased towards coverage of attacks on where the journalists are, because that is always a bias of journalists. But also, I think, covered the death count on both sides well at the beginning there, showed a good map of Israel, better than the other news summaries possibly. I didn't see a better map. And then at the end, there was some good coverage both of how one of the rockets hit downtown Tel Aviv, which is a type of damage and danger that Israelis aren't used to. So that's kind of an escalation from the Palestinian side. And then this huge escalation in the conflict between ordinary Israelis and Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis, which hasn't been that much of a problem, like the news summary said, for decades. And now there are like gangs of Jewish Israelis beating up Arab Israelis, and in some instances Arab Israelis doing violence on Jewish Israelis. And then also the CBS News Face the Nation news summary there talked about the Jewish settlers evicting Palestinians in East Jerusalem. That was actually one of the that's kind of what sparked this whole thing, and didn't get a lot of coverage like in the Fox News Sunday news summary, or at all, I think. But anyway, so I think I've covered the good and the bad in terms of media criticism of that news summary. And then the next one, ABC, of course, I have to give them kudos for picking out the three topics that I thought were the three topics. They pick out all three and put them all prominently in the news summary. First, the violence in the Middle East, but then two seismic shifts back at home, which are the change in COVID-19 mask guidance and the split in the Republican Party from Martha Raddatz, the co-host of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Then why isn't it called ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos and Martha Raddatz? Like CNN's State of the Union is now with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, but they never explain that. But I'll talk more about the news summary that hits all three of my topics after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. An explosive conflict in the Middle East continues out of control this morning, while here in America, two seismic shifts playing out this week. One of them in Washington, where Liz Cheney's ouster highlighted Trump's tightening grip on the Republican Party, posing new questions for its path forward. John Karl's interview in a moment. The other seismic shift in the fight against the pandemic. On Thursday, the CDC abruptly changing its mask guidance after more than 400 days, saying fully vaccinated Americans can go maskless indoors with a few exceptions. The surprise news, an about face from the CDC, shifting from a feeling of impending doom to cautious optimism to relaxing mask guidance in just about a month and a half. With only about 1/3 of the country fully vaccinated, some states, including California and New York, still weighing whether to adopt the change. Businesses split on how to respond, the country grappling with concerns about how to enforce these new guidelines to keep all Americans safe. We'll dig into it all this morning, beginning with CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, who joins me now. Good morning, Dr. Walensky. It was just...
I'm not going to show you a Rochelle Walensky clip from ABC, but I am about to show you two Rochelle Walensky clips from Fox News and CNN after the final news summary I'm about to show you, which, unlike the last one, which I gave kudos to for covering all three of my topics, I give kudos to the CNN State of the Union, the shortest one, so covering the least amount of material, but does really cover the two ways that people are reacting to the new CDC directive on vaccinated people not needing to wear masks, which is people are feeling relieved, but then also confused about the implementation. And that was kind of covered by Saturday Night Live in the cold open clip I showed at the beginning with Kate McKinnon playing Anthony Fauci. Well, here's Dana Bash talking about that relief and confusion. In fact, Jake Tapper came up with this thing where every week they start saying, what is the state of our union this week? And it is relieved but confused over in this clip.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is relieved and confused after the CDC announced fully vaccinated Americans do not need to wear masks or practice social distancing outdoors or inside, with some exceptions. That decision, made after data showed vaccinated people are very unlikely to get sick from COVID, even from variants, and are very unlikely to spread it to others. Public health experts hope this will be another carrot dangling in front of people who are still hesitant about getting the shots. But alongside celebrations this week, a fair amount of uncertainty. States and businesses are scrambling to decide whether they can trust the honor system. For example, you can shop at Walmart mask-free, but if you need something at Target, you better run back to the car and grab your mask. So some are worrying about the CDC's about face on indoor masking for vaccinated people and whether that will prompt unvaccinated people to also drop their masks. Well, joining me now is the director for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
And I will show basically the continuation of that clip I just showed in just a second when I give you a long, over 5-minute interview with Dana Bash asking Rochelle Walensky to clear up all the confusion that she was talking about. And there is confusion about how is this honor system going to work, and how are businesses and local governments going to respond to the new CDC guidance, and why didn't the CDC give guidance to businesses? And anyway, that will all come up in the clip after next. But first, I want to show a brief clip of Chris Wallace actually getting Rochelle Walensky to answer the question I ask in the title of this week's video: is COVID over? Or I guess is this the beginning of the end? And the answer, too early to say. Premature, I believe is the word Rochelle Walensky uses in the first Newsmaker clip, and the first of the two on the is COVID over topic over here.
Doctor, finally, where are we on this pandemic? Is it fair to say that we are at the beginning of the end? And what are the chances that either a new variant or because of the change in weather that we're all going to end up having to mask up again come this winter?
I think it's premature to declare victory. We have to remain humble. We've had way too many curveballs in this pandemic come to us. But I am really cautiously optimistic that we are in a good place right now, that cases continue to come down. We are watching it really carefully, that we have new guidance and new science, really, that informs that guidance, that allows us to be able to say vaccinated people can take off their masks. Certainly, there's a lot of virus circulating in other areas of the world, and we do need to be cautious about new variants that might emerge there, might emerge here. And we are sequencing, somewhere between 7 to 10% of all virus that is circulating here in the United States at this time. So I have cautious optimism, but my vigilance hasn't changed.
Dr. Walensky, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Cautious optimism, but vigilance. So that's the answer to is COVID over in the U.S. And of course, when COVID is still raging in India and other places around the world, that means that it can come back, maybe in the form of a variant that the vaccines don't protect us against here in the United States. So there are possible curveballs coming, and who knows what's going to happen in the winter, and there's vaccine hesitancy. Who knows what vaccine the percent of the population in the U.S. that will eventually get vaccinated. Maybe this new CDC guidance will encourage people to get vaccinated. That's one thing people have been talking about. But I want to show you a longer Rochelle Walensky clip. This is, you'll see in this clip, it's Dana Bash asking about businesses and governments and state governments and what kind of guidance they're going to get from the CDC. And you'll see Rochelle Walensky start. And of course, all politicians and government officials learn this trick that you don't have to answer the question they ask. You can give the answer you want to give. And that, especially for the first question, Rochelle Walensky had this prepared statement about let's pause and celebrate where we are. And in all three of the interviews she did, she started with this same answer. It didn't matter what the question was. And then you'll see Dana Bash go through and cover a whole bunch of confusing questions that were raised in the CNN State of the Union news summary that I talked about earlier. And I'll talk about Dana Bash's questioning of CDC Director Rochelle Walensky after we watch that clip together over here.
So, as you know by now, this move set off confusion for the 1.21 million fully vaccinated Americans. You and Dr. Fauci and President Biden told them that they didn't need to wear masks anymore. Almost 20 states, plus companies like Walmart and Starbucks, they're lifting or relaxing their mask mandates. So, did you mean for this guidance to result in stores and local governments lifting those mask mandates?
Good morning, Dana. Thanks for having me. I think we should just take a moment and pause and celebrate where we are in this moment. Cases have come down by about a third just in the last 2 weeks. Our death rates are as low as they have been since April of 2020. And vaccines are available and eligible. Everyone is eligible above the age of 12. So we have plenty of vaccine, and the science, as you just conveyed, demonstrate that they work. And so that is what allowed us to make this guidance at the individual level. This was a first step. It was foundational guidance. Everybody is really thinking about what this means now at this moment, 16 months later, as we really think about opening up. And we needed to sort of set this foundation based in the science to make sure people understood as they make their recommendations moving forward. And we are doing the hard work with them to make those recommendations.
Yeah, and I understand what you mean about a first step, but can you see, since this is big news for every American, can you see how your guidance that vaccinated people can take their masks off, but requirements from businesses, local governments to keep the masks on are sending a mixed message?
Here's what I know. I know that we need to do the hard work. This was individual guidance to understand what this means for communities, what this means for businesses. We know at the individual level, the vaccinated people are safe. More than 1/3 of Americans have been vaccinated, over 45% of adults above the age of 18. Those people are safe when they get vaccinated, after they're fully vaccinated. For those who are unvaccinated, we're really asking those businesses to work hard to make sure that they have available vaccine for those people, so that they have time off, so paid time off, so that they can get their employees vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And for those people, we really are asking them to get vaccinated or wear a mask to keep themselves safe.
And what you're describing relies on the honor system for unvaccinated individuals to wear masks. I want you to listen to what the United Food and Commercial Workers Union leader said on CNN this week about that.
They were actually, verbally abused, and in some cases physically abused by some of the customers. So now we have a situation where you really don't know whether or not somebody has been vaccinated or not, and you're going to change them from the mask police to the vaccination police.
What's the remedy for this, in your view? Should businesses even try to tell who's vaccinated and who is not? Otherwise, it's a free-for-all, as you just heard described.
Yeah, so first I want to convey that we are not saying that everybody has to take off their mask if they're vaccinated. And it's been 16 months that we've been telling people to mask, and this is going to be a slow process. The other thing is that every community is not the same. Not all communities have vaccination rates that are high, and some communities still have case rates that are high. So these decisions have to be made at the community level. But what we're saying to those essential workers is that if those workers are vaccinated, they are safe. So we are really asking the businesses to work with their workers to make sure that they have the paid time off to get themselves vaccinated so they can be safe.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess, I was trying to think, there hasn't been an interview that I have done that has, in recent times, that has been so pertinent to people's lives, how they are going to function when they walk out the door, as this interview I'm doing with you right now. And so you understand that for the past year plus, people have been hanging on the CDC's every word, every guideline. And so this was a big one. And even the local businesses are relying on you and your guidance to decide what to do and how to function.
And I completely acknowledge that. My job as the CDC director, which I promised the American people when I took it, is that I would deliver the science to them and our recommendations to them as we had it. We had 2 studies that were published the week prior to last, a major study that was published in the MMWR on Friday that demonstrates that vaccinated people are safe. Now we have the hard work to do. This was the first building block. We as a society have the hard work to do, and we at CDC are doing that work to say, what does that mean in the whole plethora of settings that we have in childcare settings, in retail businesses, in schools, in camps, in travel? What does that foundation, that science that we delivered on Thursday, mean for all of these other settings?
So, I don't know, does that take away anyone's confusion? I mean, there are a lot of topics there that I don't think, I mean, basically, the Dr. Walensky, the director of the CDC, was saying that this new guidance was the first step, and then there are thousands and thousands of pages of other guidance that's now going to be updated. But some of those problems don't have easy solutions. You know, the whole idea of who's going to be the vaccine police or vaccine ID cards, which are very controversial, especially amongst Republicans, especially amongst the people most likely to be unvaccinated, and also the whole idea of whether people are going to be on the honor system. And, you know, if you think that if you only think about it in terms of people who are vaccinated and then people who are unvaccinated by choice, then I guess it's not that big a deal that if everyone's unmasked. The people who are going to get hurt are the people who are unvaccinated by choice, but then there are all the kids who haven't been vaccinated and all sorts of, and possibly workers who haven't been vaccinated. Or, I mean, that was one thing Rochelle Walensky kept emphasizing, was that employers should get all their employees vaccinated, and that brings up the idea of a vaccine mandate to work, and that wouldn't be the only time. You know, the private sector often has various mandates like that. And anyway, but I thought Dana Bash did a good job of covering all those issues, but not really in getting clear answers. But maybe there just aren't clear answers on a lot of those issues that are still raised by this new CDC guidance. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I've been looking at the live comments along the way. I wanted to I saw a couple super chat contributions. Congratulations, Sexy Bob, for getting your super chat unlocked. I'm not sure what the baloney comment means. And then I see Lulu Girl giving me a super chat contribution. I appreciate that support. And I saw people talking about their vaccine status. I've been fully vaccinated for quite a while, and so when this CDC guidance came, I actually went out to a restaurant, although it was an outside restaurant, a couple days ago. And then tonight, that one of the reasons I'm doing the show early, my daughter just finished another year of remote college, or this is her first full year of remote college, but finished a year of college. That was one of the things I was putting off moving my show till Monday, so I didn't have to share internet bandwidth with my daughter's Zoom classes on Mondays. But she's done, and we're actually going to go out to celebrate inside a restaurant since we're all fully vaccinated. And the CDC says we can go dine in at a restaurant and not have to wear masks or worry about the spreading COVID. You know, that's the new information that came in, is that people who are vaccinated not only are safe from serious disease, but they're also not really spreading the disease. And anyway, so that is the end of the "Is COVID Over in the U.S." topic, the newsmaker clips. The next clip is the clip I promised earlier of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking to John Dickerson on CBS News' Face the Nation about this escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and all the violence. And you'll see here John Dickerson again focusing on how it affects the journalists, or the evidence, asking Benjamin Netanyahu, what is the evidence, and did you give the U.S. the evidence for this cover story from the Israelis that they haven't provided any public evidence for? They claim that Hamas had like a secret base in this building where these journalistic outlets were also based, and so John Dickerson presses Benjamin Netanyahu on that, and you'll see he gives this Israeli line that I've heard basically my whole life about how they're trying to protect civilians, and their enemies are targeting civilians when they're fighting the terrorists. And anyway, there's an interesting question at the end about Israel's special responsibility that I want to talk about, especially in terms of how the American perspective on what Israel's doing. I've seen a lot of analysis saying that it's changed since the George Floyd protests, because especially Americans on the left and in the Democratic Party, analogize the Palestinians to the black people getting shot by cops, and the Israelis are the cops, or I will talk about all of that, and maybe even this Chris Hayes book here that's A Colony in a Nation. I think, if I remember, I'll talk about all that after we watch Benjamin Netanyahu talking to John Dickerson on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning over here.
The precision of that targeting has been up for question. There's been a lot of focus on the bombing on Saturday in Gaza of a building that housed the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. The Committee to Protect Journalists demanded detailed and documented justification. This morning, there's a Jerusalem Post story that says the Americans were shown a smoking gun, that proof that Hamas was in that building. What is that proof? And did you show it to the Americans?
Well, we share with our American friends all that intelligence. And here's the intelligence we had. It's about Palestinian terrorist, an intelligence office for the Palestinian terrorist organization housed in that building that plots and organizes the terror attacks against Israeli civilians. So it's a perfectly legitimate target. And I can tell you that we took every precaution to make sure that there were no civilian injuries. In fact, no deaths, no injuries whatsoever. I can't say injuries. I don't know if somebody received a fragment of a stone. I don't know that. But no people were killed. Now imagine, ask yourself, how is that possible? You see these high-rise towers that are used by Hamas over and over again. They collapse and no one is killed. Why does that happen? Because we, unlike Hamas, take special precautions to tell people, leave the building, leave the premises. We make sure that everyone is gone before we bring down those terrorist facilities. And that's the difference between Israel and Hamas. They deliberately target our cities, deliberately target our civilians. They glorify the death of children and civilians and old people. They are happy with it. I think they're happy with any deaths that are caused to them. We grieve for every non-combatant loss in Gaza, and we grieve for all our civilians who die in Israel. We're not happy with it, and we try to minimize it.
I want to get to minimizing those casualties, but you spoke with President Biden yesterday. It's inconceivable you would have talked to him and not shared proof of Hamas in those buildings that house the journalists. Did you share that with him?
Well, we pass it through the intelligence services to our people, to those people. Why do you think we brought down that building? The interesting thing is, I would say that, all the journalists, one of the, I think, AP journalists said, we were lucky to get out. No, you weren't lucky to get out. It wasn't luck. It's because we took special pains to call people in those buildings to make sure that the premises were vacated. And that's why we brought down that building. And look, you have your own experiences, I think, in Mosul, in Fallujah, in Afghanistan. I think you can appreciate the efforts we go through in dense urban fighting when terrorists are targeting civilians who are hiding behind civilians, how difficult that is. We do our best to avoid civilian casualties, and we did that yesterday with that building as well.
Mr. Prime Minister, the arguments about how careful Israel have been are familiar ones to your critics. And in this case, with 181 Palestinians dead, 52 of them children, there's significant criticism. Amnesty International has asked the International Criminal Court to look into a refugee camp attack. The UN is meeting today. Foreign ministers of the EU are meeting. And the response has been like this one from the foreign minister of Ireland. Israel has international legal obligation to protect children in conflict and are not doing so.
That's just a false. I mean, the reason we have these casualties is because Hamas is criminally attacking us from civilian neighborhoods, from schools, from homes, from office buildings. That's what they're doing. And we're taking action, trying to target them with as great precision as we can. Unfortunately, there are occasionally civilian casualties, which we regret. But here's what happens. When the international community attacks Israel, they're actually encouraging Hamas to continue these attacks because Hamas says, it's great. We're both killing Israeli civilians and unfortunately some of ours, and they're happy with their own civilian casualties because it gets that, the international community to focus their attacks on Israel instead of Hamas. That's wrong. Sure. It's both wrong and unproductive because actually what it does is prolong the conflict and escalate and increase the number of casualties that happen as a result of the continuation of the conflict.
The question, Mr. Prime Minister, is U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken said that Israel has an extra burden, that Israel, because of its strength and power and dominance, has an extra burden on these question of casualties. The question is whether Israel is meeting its extra burden in responding to these rocket attacks from Hamas.
Certainly are.
And he goes on to cite reasons and studies that says the Israeli army is more careful than other armies. And, you heard him talking about Fallujah and, the U.S. experience in Iraq. Like, don't your war crimes help justify our war crimes or whatever. That somehow that doesn't really hold much water with me. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But what's interesting about this latest Israeli conflict with Hamas and Gaza is those talking points you heard often are accepted in a bipartisan manner by U.S. politicians. The Republicans and the Democrats. Now the Republicans mostly are still very, very pro-Israel, and you hear a lot of the things you heard Benjamin Netanyahu say there amplified on Fox News during the week. If you watch their coverage, they've been very pro-Israel. But on the Democratic side, there's really been much more of a split. Not so much in the Biden administration, but in Congress. There used to be like one or two or three or like some fringe Democrats who were more pro-Palestinian, but that's been growing and growing. And I think, there's Rashida Tlaib, who's the first Palestinian-American member of Congress. She went to the floor and talked about ending U.S. support for the Israeli apartheid state, and then she was attacked, I saw, on Fox News for that. That's an analogy to South Africa, and I always think analogies are dangerous because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not exactly like South Africa. It's that doesn't mean that there isn't some basis for the analogy. I just think that analogies are dangerous. But I'm going to make one now anyway. When I was talking about this book by Chris Hayes here that I've had in the background for a long time. This is an analysis of problems with policing in the United States, and it's called A Colony in a Nation because it basically talks about how there are a lot of people in the U.S. who see the police as like a benevolent force because in their neighborhoods, in their parts of the United States, the police are generally, they're not that present, but when they are a generally positive force in the community. But then there are certain areas, the areas that have, the areas where there are black and brown people, the areas that are more economically disadvantaged that have a lot more police, and where the policing is done in a totally different way, as if they are like colonizers, like as if they're an occupying force in a community that is supposed to be made up of our, fellow Americans. And Chris Hayes' book is about how unfair and disparate the treatment is in, the colony areas versus the, real American citizen, the real America areas. And that is a lot like what's going on in Israel. And I was talking earlier when we did the CBS News Face the Nation news summary about how now there are like clashes between ordinary people, between Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs. And in some ways, Israeli Arabs are second-class citizens. They don't serve in the army most of the time, except for a few exceptions. This is a topic I've studied for a long time. I took undergraduate courses in college on it. I visited the region multiple times. I talked about, I think several weeks ago, about being on the border of Israel and Lebanon during the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1980. Which time I went? That was in 1982. Yeah, the summer of '82. The Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and actually apparently there's Hezbollah shelling into Israel as part of this coordinated. That's what's really dangerous about this conflict, is that it could turn into an all-out war between Israel and Iran's clients. And anyway, but I think I've given all my commentary on that, where I wanted to talk about especially how that last question about Israel's special responsibility is kind of like the special responsibility that police officers have, not to use force because they are given such power to use force. And I said analogies are dangerous, but the United States empowers Israel with so much economic and military aid, and to see it used against such a weaker opponent, and people who have not had full political rights for basically my entire lifetime, it's an injustice that I think is getting more balanced coverage in the U.S. political system this time around than it has ever, and it's becoming more and more of a realistic look at the problem, rather than a lot of the pro-Israel rhetoric that I've seen from the media and from politicians in both the Republican and the Democratic Party for a long time. So that was the commentary I wanted to give on that. I noticed that I also got another couple Super Chat contributions. Thank you, Sinful Solutions and Clip Culture. Oh, Murderer. I think that came during Bibi Netanyahu's long justification there. I mean, that's the thing also, is that Bibi Netanyahu is the worst of Israeli policy, and has, along with Trump, and really devastated any chances for a two-state solution. Things were a lot better 4 years ago, even though they weren't great. But anyway, I have spoken enough about that. I hope you will let me know what you think of my analysis, which, like I said, is based on many years of both study and interest in this particular issue. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a news topic for many years to come. And with that, I'm going to move on to my final topic for the program. This often happens. The topic from last week doesn't end in a week. The Republican mythology versus ideology topic I was talking about last week, where the Republican Party hasn't, the test of whether or not you're a Republican doesn't come down to policy, low taxes, strong defense, small government, pro-Israel, or whatever it is that the Republicans are supposed to stand for. Now it's like, do you buy into the big lie, or don't you buy into the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump? And I covered that last week, but I wanted to cover it again this week because the way the issue came to a head last week was the purge of Liz Cheney, which I talked about last week, but this week Liz Cheney was on a couple programs, and so I have two Liz Cheney clips, and I'm not a big Liz Cheney fan, but it is really important as to what's happening with the Republican Party, and especially about this one issue of accepting the big lie, and the first interview with Jonathan Karl, you'll see it starts off with him talking about the big lie and both of them. I have two clips I'm comparing here. I'm looking at my notes down here. There's the. Oh wait. That's right. And then I have a third clip, which is the Dan Crenshaw clip from NBC News' Meet the Press. He's a Republican who's trying not to take sides and say, oh, we should be focusing on the real issues. But I'll talk about that at the end and how that's not a real viable strategy. But ABC does talk about the big lie being a lie about the stolen election. And I want to compare it to Chris Wallace talking to Liz Cheney, where it's what you say is a lie. That's the standard. Chris Wallace never can bring himself to say that what Donald Trump is saying about the stolen election is that the issue is this lie. Is that what you say is a lie. But that's the second clip. First, here's Jonathan Karl talking about the new commission and whether Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, is going to testify about the conversation he had with Trump during the January 6th insurrection. Anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch the first Liz Cheney clip talking to Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week This Morning over here.
What does it say about the party choosing somebody to replace you who was effectively chosen by Donald Trump and is saying what he's been saying, those very lies that you're talking about?
I think it's dangerous. I think that we have to recognize how quickly things can unravel. We have to recognize what it means for the nation to have a former president who has not conceded and who continues to suggest that our electoral system cannot function, cannot do the will of the people. To cause that kind of questioning about our process, frankly, it's the same kinds of things that the Chinese Communist Party says about democracy, that it's a failed system, that America's a failed nation. I won't be part of that, and I think it's very important for Republicans who won't be part of that to stand up and speak out.
When you say dangerous how? Are you suggesting that January 6th could happen again, or maybe something worse?
I think there's no question. I mean, we've now seen the consequences. We've seen how far President Trump was willing to go. We've seen not only his provocation of the attack, but his refusal to send help when it was needed, his refusal to immediately, say stop. And that in and of itself, in my view, was a very clear violation of his oath and of his duty.
Now, the Speaker, along with at least one key Republican, have announced an agreement on a commission to look into what happened on January 6th. Should Kevin McCarthy be willing to testify before that commission? After all, he is one of the few people that we know of that was actually talking to Donald Trump while the attack was taking place.
He absolutely should, and I wouldn't be surprised if he were subpoenaed. I think that he very clearly and said publicly that he's got information about the president's state of mind that day.
So you would welcome a subpoena for Kevin McCarthy to testify to that commission?
I would anticipate that I would hope he doesn't require a subpoena, but I wouldn't be surprised if he were subpoenaed.
How many of your colleagues actually believe that stuff? Actually believe the election was stolen?
I think it's relatively small number.
Adam Kinzinger says it's a handful. Do you think that's right?
I think that's probably right.
So they're just saying it to placate Donald Trump?
I think that we as a party are in a situation with respect to the former president that is really dangerous.
Did you vote for Donald Trump in 2020?
I did.
Do you regret that vote?
Look, I think that
how could you not regret that vote given what's happened?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was never going to support Joe Biden, and I do regret the vote. I think that it was a vote based on policy, based on sort of substance and what I know in terms of the kinds of policies he put forward that were good for the country. But I think it is fair to say I regret the vote.
If the Republican Party...
What's kind of funny about the end of that answer is, I don't know if it was acting. I don't think it was acting on Liz Cheney's part. You rarely see someone... a real disciplined politician like Liz Cheney decide to like change their answer or like think about their answer and change it in the middle of the answer. But it almost it looked to me, unless she was acting, like during that answer she started off not wanting to say she regretted her vote for Donald Trump, but then as she thought about it she said, no, I do regret my vote, as long as she made clear she'd never vote for Biden, of course. But the other thing I think was interesting in Liz Cheney's answer there is the way she's talking about the undermining of faith in our democracy being the same thing you hear from China and Russia and authoritarians. And in that way, it aligns Liz Cheney with one of Biden's big themes in his faux State of the Union speech, where he was talking about how this is an important moment in history where it's going to be democracies versus authoritarians and which system works better. And the authoritarians are saying democracies are weak and ineffective, and this whole undermining of our democratic process, as Liz Cheney was saying, plays into the case of authoritarians. So I like how Liz Cheney is aligning with one of Biden's big themes for his presidency. And if Liz Cheney is going to be a leader of a split off of the Republican Party, that can only help the Democrats and get elected if there's that attuning of messaging. But the one thing I talked about in terms of comparing that clip to the Fox News Sunday clip I'm about to show you, that covers a lot of the same topic, especially the getting a subpoena to Kevin McCarthy. You notice, like I said, that Chris Wallace does not say lies. John Karl, at the beginning and end of that clip, referred to the lie about the stolen election as like, here it's on Fox News, it's not a lie, it's what you say is a lie. What you say is a lie. And shouldn't a journalist, on a factual question as to whether the election was stolen from Donald Trump, be able to say that is a lie? That's my question that I will talk with you a little more about after we watch the Fox News Sunday interview of Liz Cheney, or this 3.5-minute segment of it over here.
You also say that Kevin McCarthy should testify, but what it appears is going to be a new commission to investigate the riot on January 6th, and should testify specifically about the conversation he had with the president on that day, where he reportedly called the president and said, you got to call this off. And the president said, Kevin, it appears some people are more interested in this election than you are. I asked Congressman McCarthy about that a couple of weeks ago. Take a look at that exchange. Has the president ever reached out to you since that report came out to discuss what you and he talked about in the January 6th phone call? And did you say to him, I can't because we're under oath?
No.
That never happened?
It's never happened.
And you would
never even close.
And if it did happen, you would agree that would be witness tampering?
Yeah, but never happened.
Congresswoman, do you know anything about that, whether or not Kevin McCarthy and Donald Trump talked and the president tried to reach out to, in effect, get their story straight about what happened in that January 6th phone call?
Leader McCarthy has spoken to a number of people in large groups and small groups since the 6th about his exchanges with the president. He's spoken publicly on the House floor about his view of the president's responsibility. I think it's very important that, he clearly has facts about that day, that an investigation into what happened, into the president's actions, ought to get to the bottom of. And I think that he has important information that needs to be part of any investigation, whether it's the FBI, the Department of Justice, or this commission that I hope will be set up.
What do you think that accomplishes? If he testifies before the commission, I mean, I understand your concern about President Trump and what you say are his lies about the election, but what do you think it accomplishes to talk about a conversation on January 6th? Do you think it raises issues of President Trump's responsibility for the riot, whether or not he's trying to tamper with Kevin McCarthy as a witness?
Certainly. I mean, I think that any conversations, and we know certainly that conversation happened, any conversations that have gone on with the president about the president's potential involvement in January 6th, his potential determination not to step in and offer assistance, any conversations that have to do with, any members of Congress, those, people who may be retired. We know that there were conversations in the Oval Office before this about the possibility of declaring martial law and seizing, election and seizing the ballot machines. So I think that all of this really points to why it's so important that we have a commission. We've done that after Pearl Harbor. We did it after the Kennedy assassination. We did it after 9/11. It's the way that we as a country come together in a nonpartisan fashion to understand what happened, to get to the bottom of it. It must have subpoena power, and to begin to take steps so we can ensure it never happens again.
I got about a minute left, Congresswoman.
So, like I said, you did notice that in that clip, Chris Wallace refers to what you say are lies about the election when talking to Liz Cheney, which I think is a major breach of journalistic ethics or whatever, that you should be able to call a lie when it's a factual question as to whether Biden stole the 2020 election from Trump, which didn't happen based on a whole bunch of evidence that I'm not going to go into right now because I've covered it ad nauseum on previous live streams. But one thing I also wanted to criticize Chris Wallace for there is he talked about having a subpoena on House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to talk about this conversation he had with Trump on January 6th. But he didn't really talk about the conversation that Trump had with Kevin McCarthy on January 6th. In fact, he said, I guess people are more interested in the election. He used the word interested, which is not what Trump supposedly said. And instead of talking about how Kevin McCarthy could actually say, I brought up well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are. That's what it is, upset. And he's talking about the people rampaging through the Capitol being more upset than you are, which I think is a more emotional word than interested. So not only did Chris Wallace mischaracterize what Kevin McCarthy claims Trump said on January 6th, and Kevin McCarthy kind of denied it when he was talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. He's like, Chris Wallace was like asking him over and over again, did Trump say that? And at one point he says, no, that's not what's important or something. So it was, and under oath, I'd really like to see what Kevin McCarthy says about that conversation. But then Chris Wallace really focused on this idea of a subsequent call from Trump to get their stories straight, and Kevin McCarthy saying, I can't do that because I'm going to be under oath or whatever. And he talked about that and I think took attention away from what Trump and McCarthy actually talked about on January 6th, where, I mean, it really shows Trump's state of mind that he was pro-insurrection. He was in favor of the people who are out there more upset about the election because, of course, Trump told them that it was stolen. Even this week, he was out there saying crime of the century. And that's the real problem with the Republicans who aren't confronting this issue and this cancer in the Republican Party. And I don't think you can just ignore it, although this next and final newsmaker clip is Representative Dan Crenshaw of Texas trying to thread that needle and being neither pro-Trump or anti-Trump, but just wanting to talk about the real issues. And I'm not going to show the whole interview, but this is over 6 minutes. This is the longest clip because you have to do a lot of spinning to try to avoid this issue that is smack dab in the middle of the fight to save American democracy. As Liz Cheney, who I'm no fan of, was saying, it's undermines our democracy in the way that the authoritarians want to undermine democracy to show that democracy doesn't work. And anyway, here you're going to see Chuck Todd, I think, actually do a pretty good job of cross-examining Dan Crenshaw on some of the foibles of his attempt to ignore the problem in the final newsmaker clip that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Welcome back. The sacking of Congresswoman Liz Cheney last week was certainly what happens to someone in Republican leadership who refuses to embrace former President Trump's lie that the 2020 election was stolen. But it may be just as much an attack on our national memory. Here's House Leader Kevin McCarthy last week.
But I don't think anybody is questioning the legitimacy of the presidential election. I think that is all over with.
Well, that would be news to the former president himself, who has made it clear it's not all over with, at least for him. Then there are these statements from Republican House members looking to wipe clean our collective memory of January 6th.
The truth is being censored and covered up. As a result, the DOJ is harassing peaceful patriots across the country.
In fact, it was Trump supporters who lost their lives that day, not Trump supporters who were taking the lives of others.
If you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
So joining me now are two Republican members of the House, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, one of the remaining Republican members of Congress who has remained critical of Mr. Trump and publicly supportive of Liz Cheney, and Dan Crenshaw of Texas, who says he's neither a Trump loyalist nor an anti-Trumper. And I'm going to begin with Congressman Crenshaw. Congressman, welcome to Meet the Press. And let me just start with whether you agree with the following analysis, which is Liz Cheney was kicked out of leadership simply because she wouldn't carry the water of former President Trump's election lies. Do you agree with that statement?
No, fundamentally, I don't. Look, thanks for having me on. I was a little surprised because I've been so detached from this drama, and it is drama, over the past month. But I have followed it. And look, you can't forget that we already had this vote for Liz Cheney. We had this vote, and that vote was directly because of her vote for impeachment. And she won overwhelmingly. The Republican conference said, look, we disagree, and Liz did not apologize. And she said she would not apologize. And she still won that vote overwhelmingly to be a leader in our conference. You can't forget that. You can't gloss over that fact. But what happened after that, and I think the reason that a lot of our colleagues got more frustrated with her is because effectively, she kept demanding that everybody else start apologizing. So she refuses to apologize, which is fine. I don't think she should. But then she demands that everybody else does. And I think what Kevin McCarthy was trying to say there was, look, there is disagreement and it's time to move on. We can keep having that fight if we'd like, but what is the point and what is the outcome? When in reality, we need to be talking about the things that American people actually care about. I got to tell you, this is not the subject that I'm asked about. I get asked a lot of questions. Sure. I'm always doing events. I'm always meeting with people. I never get asked about this. I get asked about why is there rising inflation? Why is there a border crisis? What is going on in the Middle East? Why can't we get gas? What is happening to our energy infrastructure? Why can't I hire people? Why are they getting paid by the government to stay at home instead of come to work? These are things that really affect people, not this internal drama. And one of the reasons I agreed to come on your show is basically to say that this isn't that important to people.
Well, but why should anybody believe a word you say if the Republican Party itself doesn't have credibility? I want you to take a look at what Liz Cheney said to CNN on Friday, because this is her rationale for fighting it. Take a listen.
For Republicans to be in a position where we can stop those policies, we've got to be able to tell people you can trust us to be based around conservative principles, and to reject the lie and to protect the Constitution.
Look, for her and for many Americans, sitting here and saying, oh, there's disagreement about the election. Look, there's not disagreement about the facts. This is, do any of your critiques come across as credible if you can't accept the fundamental fact that our democracy held a free and fair election?
No, but I can speak for myself, of course, and you know where I've been on this issue, I assume, right?
Well, I do. In fact, in December,
I
know how you voted.
Everything I've ever said.
I understand that, but in December, you signed on to that lawsuit that the Texas Attorney General filed to question the elections of other states, which seemed to be a pretty anti-federalist thing to do. Why did you sign on to that?
Painted that as, and you guys in the press. Because you guys in the press painted that as some extreme action, and of course it wasn't. That amicus brief was a simple question to the Supreme Court and saying, can you please speak to this question of whether of whether process changes in the election last minute not approved by the legislature can be deemed constitutional. It was a question. Now, they didn't want to answer that question, and I said it's unconstitutional for us to overturn the election in Congress. So I did not vote.
You don't feel like he's fed, but you know, look, but this is the issue that many people have, is that you're sitting here trying to say, no, I just had a specific question, yet what you did gets weaponized by the former president. Did you see the rantings of him yesterday? And to the point where a Republican official in Maricopa County called the former president unhinged. You know, I understand you guys want to put this behind you, but he is the leader of your party, and he doesn't stop talking about this nonsense.
Chuck, look, he's one of many leaders in the party. He's a former president. We're 5 months into President Biden's presidency. And there is a time to move on. And look, you guys in the press love doing this, and I get it, right? the press is largely liberal. They're largely pro-Democrat.
No, don't start that. That is the late look. There's nothing lazier.
I mean,
there's nothing lazier than that.
There's a lot of reasoning to keep this alive.
I understand what you're trying to appease.
There's a lot of people in my party that take the bait. I'm not going to take the bait here.
I'm not trying to bait you. I'm trying to figure out
looking for.
Why do we sit here and have a political party that is basically rallying around this bizarre lie and mythology that the former president is doing, and you guys just want to say, hey, pay no attention to this, that somehow we in the press are bringing it up. It's the former president.
I already debunked the notion. I already debunked the notion that there's no space in the party for that. Remember, Liz won that first election.
She's not there now.
She won that first leadership vote. Okay. Well, yeah, and I told you why. I helped you understand why. And what I'm trying to help you understand is that these are not the phone calls I get about this, about who's the leader of the party, what's happening with Trump. My Republican supporters do not ask me about Trump. They don't ask me about what he said. They're not riled.
And then he kind of loops back on the answer you already saw about, the issue is, why are people coming across the border? Why are people getting paid to stay home from their jobs? And all sorts of other Republican talking points that are only vaguely related to actual factual information, but I'm not going to go and debunk all those, although I like the way he claims to have debunked something earlier in his answer that he never really debunked, or that it wasn't about Liz Cheney's refusal to accept the big lie or whatever. And I think that Chuck Todd did a fairly good job there cross-examining Dan Crenshaw, and also the introductory segment about Kevin McCarthy and other saying that, nobody cares about, nobody's questioning the election, but all these people are questioning the election. And Paul Gosar and who was that? Representative Clyde, who claimed they were, they're just like tourists. And of course, he was just talking about that. There was this one bizarre piece of video where they were walking through the roped-in area and not causing trouble, but that really is not what I remember from January 6th. I watched it live. I was horrified. And even more horrified as the information mounts. And I don't see how Dan Crenshaw can try to thread that needle and not be pro-Trump, not be anti-Trump. And, it's okay that Liz Cheney won't apologize, but she can't make other people apologize for supporting an insurrection and accepting this big lie about the election being stolen. I think that she should be asking other Republicans to apologize. I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear Trump apologize. When am I going to get my apology from Trump? Answer me that down in the comments section if you'd like. But that was my last news clip. I've been following along the live viewers, and I really especially appreciate those people who supported the live show with, especially this early live show, with Super Chat contributions. I've taken a screenshot of all of those here. Let me show that real briefly. So thanks to all of you, and I will be back next Sunday, and all the Sundays through May. I believe I'm going to move to Monday on because the last that'll be 2 more Sundays, and then I will move to Monday on June 7th. I haven't decided the exact time. If you're a loyal viewer and you've watched this long, let me know. Would you rather I did the show at 11 a.m. Pacific, noon Pacific, or 1 p.m. Pacific? Because I think those are the 3 times I'm kind of playing around with right now for when my it won't be Sunday clip round. It'll be the Monday Media Mix-Up, I think. The Monday Media Mix-Up. So let me know when you think I should do that. And before I finish the show, I know I've got the Dash and Sandy or Dandy fans out there. So I've got two bonus Dash and Sandy clips for you. First, I want to show you Dash and Sandy going outside the door. When I started watching Fox News Sunday, I don't know. Do I watch too much Fox News? Is it getting on Dash and Sandy's nerves? You can hear speed. I watched it speeded up. I think at 1.75 speed. But you'll hear in the background Chris Wallace, the Fox News Sunday intro you watched earlier as a news clip is in the background. Dash and Sandy don't want it. They're on their way out.
We begin with breaking news. Another night of fighting between the Israelis and Palestinians in the worst outbreak of violence in years. Israeli airstrikes hitting Gaza and targeting this high-rise housing offices of the Associated Press and other media outlets. Journalists getting out safely after being warned a strike was imminent. The fighting was also taking place inside Israel between Arabs and Jews and on the border with Lebanon and Jordan. The U.S. spearheading diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the violence. President Biden speaking Saturday with both Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian leader Raddatz. Let's take a look now from Trey reporting from the Israel-Gaza.
And I think that look at the end kind of supports my claim about Sandy not being happy about all the Fox News. But the other thing, I often show them going out the door, but I want to show how this is actually earlier when Sandy came in the door. For some reason, Sandy always goes right for Dash and bops Dash, Sandy the dog bops Dash the cat with her nose. And I caught that on video, so I thought I would also share that before I end the show over here.
It's absolutely bogus. I was there. I watched a number of folks walk down to the White House and then back. I've got a balcony on my office.
There you get some more Dash and Sandy interaction, and that's all the time I have. I have to start getting ready for the rest of the day, but I'll be back next Sunday, and for a couple more Sundays till I move till Monday. I'll talk about that more. Let me know what time you want me to do the show on Monday. Should it be 11 a.m., noon, or 1 p.m. Pacific time? Anyway, until next week when I'll talk more about that, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.